Hi everyone and welcome to a new video. This time, instead of covering running the newest OS versions, I'm going in a different direction. And this two-part video series will cover running Windows 98 2nd edition on a modern Mac. Running Windows 98 today seems like a strange thing to do. First of all, it can't run natively on a modern 64-bit CPU and definitely not on an M1 based SoC. Secondly, it's seriously outdated and it's kind of considered useless for today's productivity. Thinking about it further, you will see that it opens a whole new old world. There are so much high quality applications and especially games out there, which you can't run anymore on a modern PC, let alone a Mac. The first part of this video will cover the step-by-step process to get a working Windows 98 installation, including proper graphics, sound and an easy way to exchange files between macOS and Windows. The second part will focus on using this retro operating system today and will cover some old school tools and games, so make sure to get subscribed and enable notifications if you don't want to miss that. Before we get started, I'd like to mention that you can find all detailed steps on my blog jensd.be as well. So if you plan to go through this yourself, definitely have a look over there. To install Windows 98 on a new Mac with a 64-bit Intel CPU or M1 SoC, I will be using UTM. I've used this before to run Windows 11 on an M1 based Mac, for which you can find a card here in case you're interested. UTM is using QEMU under the hood and is capable of emulating different processor architectures. This includes x86 or i386, which was the architecture of the era where Windows 98 was new. It will also allow us to configure the required emulated hardware, like a video card and sound card, compatible with the old OS version. For this video, I'll be using a MacBook Air M1, but the exact same instructions should work on another Mac as well, both with an Intel CPU or the M1 variant. The first thing we need is a copy of the Windows 98 SE installation media. It shouldn't be very hard to get your hands on the Windows 98 SE ISO file. The first hit I had when searching for the term on Google got me one. Just pay attention that you get an OEM version, as that is the version that is bootable from the CD or ISO. Together with the ISO, you will also need a product key, which I found in the same place as I found the ISO. As I'm not sure if you can see Windows 98 SE as abandonware yet, and it's a gray area anyway, to distributed software, I'm not going too deep into this, but I'm sure you can find what you need pretty easily. After you get your hands on that ISO, which we will use to get Windows installed, we first need to install UTM on your Mac if you haven't done so yet. Download the UTM DMG from the website. Once downloaded, simply open the DMG file and drag the utm.app to your applications folder using Finder. Then, to start UTM, launch it as any other application on your Mac. At this point, we have both the ISO file for installing Windows and we have our hypervisor/emulator called UTM ready. Now we need to create a new virtual machine with UTM for use with the next step. It took me quite some time and experimenting to figure out what was the best match for maximum compatibility with this old operating system. Make sure to configure the VM in the exact same way. In UTM, click on Create a new virtual machine. In the first step, Information, give the VM a name. I chose Win98SE and optionally choose an icon for it. In the second tab, System, select i386, x86 as architecture. As system, choose for the standard PC with the i440FX with Pentium 2 from 1996. Lower the RAM to anything under 512 MB. As you can see, I chose for 64, which should be plenty for most of the things. Then click Show Advanced Settings and uncheck UEFI Boot. The QEMU tab can stay as is, so let's move to the Drives tab. Here, click New Drive, leave the 10 GB and IDE interface and click Create. This will be the virtual hard disk where we will install Windows 98 on. Then click New Drive again, check the removable option, leave IDE and click Create. This will be the virtual CD drive where we can mount the earlier mentioned ISO. In the Display tab, change the emulated display card to Series CLGD. In the Input tab, check the Legacy PS2 mode. The Networking tab can stay as is, and finally, in the Sound tab, change the emulated audio card to Creative Sound Blaster 16. Then click Save. This will create the VM. One final thing which we need to do before we can move to the next step is to mount the installation ISO to the virtual CD drive. To do so, select the VM with the name you gave it on the left side in UTM, Win98SE for me. Then on the CD/DVD section, choose Browse. In here, navigate to the location where you downloaded the Windows 98 SE ISO, select it and click Open. This would be like physically inserting that CD in the CD drive of a real machine. Alright, all preparation is done and we can now finally launch the VM and get Windows 98 SE installed. Just click the large play button after selecting the VM in the left column in order to do so. As soon as the VM boots, it will boot from that mounted ISO as there is nothing on the hard disk, and you should see the following menu pop up. Here, go for the second option, Boot from CD-ROM, using the arrow keys and press Enter. This menu is just there to prevent people from running into issues with booting their PC when they would leave the Windows 98 CD in the drive. In the next menu, choose the first option to start Windows 98 setup from CD-ROM. This will load some drivers, like the one for the CD drive, and will load the tool that checks if there is a partition created to install Windows onto. This is not the case, as it's the first time we do this. Just press Enter to start, and in the next screen, choose to use all unallocated space for Windows. Now choose Yes to enable large disk support, as what we have here is considered a large disk in the VM. After doing this, the system must reboot, and we need to repeat the first steps here again in order to continue the setup. Choose Boot from CD-ROM, and then start Windows 98 setup from CD-ROM as well, exactly as we did before. This time the setup program will format the hard drive, or at least the disk image which we assigned to the VM. This takes some time. Once the format process is done, there will still be a quick disk integrity check with Microsoft ScanDisk. I really forgot that this tool existed, although I spent hours of my time looking at it in the past. If all goes well, you will end up at the graphical interface of the Windows 98 setup. In case you have issues with the mouse pointer, click the mouse pointer icon in the top bar of the UTM VM. This will allow you to better control the mouse in the VM. You can press Ctrl and Alt to release the mouse back to macOS if you need to. Click on Continue in the welcome screen and choose the default installation location as destination. The installer checks if there is enough space and if there is something else on the disk. Eventually, we can choose what to install. As you can see, I went for a custom install and selected as good as everything I could. It shouldn't really matter much as all of these components can be removed or added later as well. Now we need to give the VM a name. Again, not very important for the way we'll be using the VM. Choose the keyboard layout, local settings, and location. And here we can click Next to start copying the files and do the actual installation. This will copy the required files to the virtual hard disk and will again take some time. When all required files are copied, the VM will restart. After the reboot, you should be presented with the first boot screen of your fresh Windows 98 SE installation. This brings back some memories for sure. Once the VM is fully booted, the setup process will continue and you can enter your name, organization, and eventually the product key. The next stage of the installation tries to install the drivers for the virtual hardware in the system. During this process, one or more reboots are required. I noticed that in some cases the VM gets stuck while restarting. If you run into this, release your mouse pointer with Ctrl and Alt and then just turn off the VM and start it again using the buttons on top of the VM window in UTM. It can be pretty annoying, but unfortunately that's how it is. Eventually, we end up with the last stage. This again can take quite some time. In the end, and of course after another reboot, you will end up with a nice and clean retro Windows 98 desktop. Pure nostalgia to see this if you ask me, especially on a modern Mac. This is the end of the installation step and you now have a working Windows 98 SE installation on your Mac. At this point the installation already works pretty well, especially since we chose specific virtual hardware that is fairly compatible with Windows 98. For example, if your sound was on, you could already hear that nostalgic Windows 98 boot sound. Let me make this a bit bigger and then let's first have a look at the system properties. A Pentium 2, at least that's what the VM thinks it is running on as we configured it in UTM, and 64 MB of RAM. Device Manager shows us that there is still some work to do, as you can see. Let's first change the resolution and color depth. As the drivers for the video card are present, we can just right-click on the desktop and choose Properties. Then go to Settings and set this to your preference. I also suggest to set a nice background or wallpaper to make the experience complete. We still have a few drivers and devices like the network card which are missing, as we could see in Device Manager. The network card is an important one in case you want to easily copy files back and forth to the VM. To fix this, we will first need to tell Windows that that plug-and-play BIOS system device is actually the PCI bus. This will allow the operating system to detect the components connected to it, like that virtual network card. The card which gets selected in UTM by default and works on Windows 98 is a Realtek RTL8193. Unfortunately, the Windows 98 SE installation doesn't have any drivers for it. I did prepare an ISO file which you can download from my blog and I also put a link in the description for this. So release the mouse on your VM with Ctrl and Alt, then download the win98tools.iso and swap the ISO file in UTM to that one. As you can see, that ISO contains the drivers for the network card and some other small tools which can come in very useful for our setup here. First, let's copy that folder containing the drivers to the desktop. Then we can also run NUSB33E to install missing USB drivers. These will be used in a later step. Now to continue, let's first swap that ISO back to the Windows 98 SE ISO, which we used for the installation. Next up, we need to go to Device Manager by right-clicking on My Computer, Properties, Device Manager. Then double-click on that plug-and-play BIOS system device with the exclamation mark on it. Go to the Driver tab and click Update Driver. Click Next and choose to display a list of drivers. Choose Show All Hardware and in the right list select PCI bus. Click Next and choose Yes to use that driver. Finish the setup steps and reboot the VM when asked to do so. The VM might be stuck again during restarting, but we already know what to do. When Windows is getting started after this, a lot of new hardware is being detected. For each of these components, follow the same steps, only take a different approach when Windows is detecting the network card, which we will come across in a bit. Click Next at the start of the Add New Hardware wizard. Select the first option to search for the best driver and click Next. In the following step, uncheck all places where to search and click Next again. As you can see, Windows will find the correct driver in its database and will install it. As mentioned, you need to repeat this for each piece of hardware which is getting detected. In case Windows would ask you to restart, choose to not do so. At a certain point, when you see that the new hardware is called PCI Ethernet controller, we need to take a little different approach, as this is the network card for which we need to point to the RTL8193 drivers, which we copied earlier. For this, in the first screen, just click Next again, but then select the second option to display a list of all drivers instead. In the list that comes up, choose Network Adapters, then click Have Disk and click Browse. Navigate to the location where we copied the drivers for the network card, see Windows Desktop RTL8139 drivers and click OK. Select the only option in the list of proposed hardware and wait. It might look here like nothing is happening, but just be a bit patient. Then continue with the installation of the driver. For the rest of the hardware detected, repeat the same steps as before. When you eventually end up on your desktop, shut down the VM. And power it back on. When the system comes back, more hardware, like the IDE controller, is getting detected and another reboot is required. It took a lot of steps, time and reboots, but if you're still following at this stage, all drivers are installed and all components in our Windows 98 SE installation should be fully functional. One last thing which I wanted to explain is how to get software and files on the VM. The easiest option is to use ISO files. A lot of games and apps are available for download in this format, so it's definitely a good option. You can use the virtual CD drive in UTM to mount and unmount different ISO images, as we did a few times in the previous steps already. Do keep in mind that BinQ or MDF files will first need to be converted to the ISO format before they are usable, but this shouldn't be that hard. In order to easily and quickly exchange files between macOS and the Windows 98 VM, we do need something different. Unfortunately, most modern methods and protocols did not yet exist, or did, but the versions supported became considered unsafe in the meanwhile. After some experimenting and searching, for me, using FTP, although kind of considered unsafe as well today, worked the best. It's not very easy to find a working FTP server for a modern macOS version like Big Sur or Monterey, but fortunately I found an application called Quick FTP Server in the App Store. The app is free and can just be installed from there. Download and install this app on macOS from the App Store and start it. In the main screen, select the root path. This is the directory which will be accessible from Windows 98 and select a port. The port number has to be higher than 1024, so the default port 21 will not work. I chose 2121. In the Authentication tab then, enter a username and password, which will be required in order to access the files through the server. Here you can also choose if you want this access to be read-only or read-write. Then click the Start button on the first screen. As you can see, this also displays the IP address of your macOS device. This is the IP 192.168.0.221 in my case. We will need to connect to this IP from our Windows 98 VM to access the files offered over the FTP server. Now back to the VM. As we install the drivers for the network card and UTM is configured to have that card in a shared network with our macOS device, we should be able to reach the IP where the FTP server is now listening on. We can use the built-in FTP client in Internet Explorer to access the server. But in order to start using Internet Explorer, we'll first need to go through the Internet Connection Wizard. So let's go to Start, Settings, Control Panel, Internet Options, Connections, and click on the Setup button. Choose for a manual configuration and click Next. In the next screen, choose I connect through a local area network and click Next again. Then uncheck the automatic discovery of the proxy server. Choose to not set up Internet Mail when asked. Going through these steps allows us to start Internet Explorer. To connect to the FTP server, which we started on macOS, we can enter the following in the address bar: ftp:// IP address : port. So for my example, ftp:// 192.168.0.221:2121. If all goes well, Internet Explorer will ask you for a username and password. This should match with whatever user and password you entered in the Authentication tab before starting the QuickFTP server. Once you're logged in, you can just copy files between the FTP server and the VM, which makes it easy to exchange between Windows and macOS. The rest is for the next part, where I will try to run some popular applications and games on this modern Windows 98 machine, so make sure to subscribe and stay tuned for the next video. Thanks a lot for watching, I really hope you enjoyed this, and if you did, please put a thumbs up. It was nice to have you here, and I hope to see you back here soon.